Trump, of course, as is his wont, has made threatening noises, saying that in 2 or 3 months, it would come to a head. I wanted to ask you about the efficacy of a strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. I've heard from senior politicians that, without betraying classified information, that the Iranians would be able to pull it together fairly rapidly. Then I spoke with General Jones here last week, and he indicated that he thought a strike could in fact do serious damage and would be effective if necessary. What's your take, I'm wondering?
Sure, it's a little between the two, but there's a critically important change that's taken place. And I think anyone with intellectual integrity has to change their views when circumstances change. For many years, not only did I'm on the record of saying that I thought that there should not be a U.S. strike, or much less an Israeli strike on the nuclear program. But more to the point, I found it to be a very boring topic because it was quite simple. Israel doesn't have the ability, and the United States doesn't have the will, isn't going to do it. So this was a topic that got a lot of air on the media, got a lot of print columns, but it wasn't a very interesting topic to me. And the reason why I was against it was because the impact was the benefit was too low and the costs were too high. Circumstances have changed, and we have to recognize that circumstances have changed. Not completely. It's not like risk has gone down to zero. It's not like FSC has gone up to 100%. But the fundamental balance has changed. The likelihood of Hamas taking orders from Iran and attacking Israel, it's zero. The likelihood of Hezbollah doing it, having real the kind of strategic impact that we used to very much worry about, very much diminished. There are other proxies around, or they've lost Syria to do this, very, very much diminished.
What about shutting down the Persian Gulf and sending oil prices soaring?
They do. They have the ability to do that. They have the ability to strike at as they did before at Abqaiq in Saudi Arabia, at energy resources on the other side of the Gulf. They have the ability to strike at American personnel in the Gulf, either through their proxies or directly. This is not a risk-free enterprise, and anyone who's presenting it as a risk-free enterprise is mistaken. But it is not nearly as high of a risk as it was before. On the other side of the equation, you have no strategic air defenses right now in Iran. There are two big losers from the Israeli strikes on Iran. The first, of course, was the IRGC and everyone who was manning their air defenses. But the second big loser were all the people in CENTCOM who were doing military planning across many administrations, and those plans asserted a certain amount of losses and a certain amount of time and a certain amount of weapons that would be required in order to take out the Russian strategic air defenses, and those were all proved wrong. The Israelis proved them wrong. But that does not mean that there are no air defenses in Iran. They have tactical air defenses, shorter-term air defenses. Now, can those be overcome? Yes, they can. But what it means is it's not one strike. It's a campaign.
How long a campaign?
The real answer is we don't know until any plan goes out the window the moment that it starts. But this would not be a single-digit days campaign. This would be taking out a good more of their air defense system. It would mean hitting a number of their nuclear facilities, including ones that are very hard to hit. Could Israel do this by itself? I still color me skeptical on that, despite what Israel has done, and have a real effect. Could the United States do it? Yes, the United States can do it, and could have a much larger effect. So then the question is, why would you do it? Well, there are two big reasons. Again, Iran has changed its behavior. Iran has proved itself not just a regional threat to U.S. interests, but a global, an extra-regional threat to U.S. interests. It's allied itself with Russia in the war in Ukraine. So, a sentence that if I would have said it to you, 5 years ago, you would have found it crazy. They crossed a very clear line of moving beyond the shadow wars that had been going on a long time between Iran and Israel to an overt, open, not once but twice attacks on Israelis' land directly. The first time Israel was convinced by the Biden administration to take the win, as they said, and the second time they took action against it. And the effect of Israeli action was many, many multiples more of an impact than the Iranian one. Now, the Iranian one was stopped not just by Israeli action, but because of United States action and the United States air defenses in coordination with many of our allies around there. This is a reality that the Iranians have to pay attention to. But they crossed a Rubicon with this. And they've also crossed another Rubicon with their assassination attempts. I mean, the last time a former president was the subject of a serious assassination attack by a foreign leader was when Saddam Hussein tried to kill George H.W. Bush. Listen, many countries in the world, in fact, most countries in the world, do not possess the power to deter other countries from assassinating their former leaders. The United States is not one of those countries. We possess the power to do this. The Clinton administration decided to use that power to strike, to destroy the intelligence headquarters of Saddam Hussein after it discovered this plot, and to very clearly give a message to Saddam through all the different channels of where the red line was. And by the way, it worked. Saddam did lots of other things that we didn't like during the Clinton administration, but one thing that he did not do anymore was try to assassinate George H.W. Bush or other American leaders. For a number of reasons, the Biden administration chose not to approach the current situation with Iran in the same way that the Clinton administration approached the situation with Iraq. I think that was a mistake. I think it's a motivation for doing, which is why I balance out on, if I was in the government, of saying that I think we should do an attack on the nuclear program. Now, there's a lot of information that I don't have because I don't have access to the intelligence. Would it end their program? No, their program doesn't end as long as there are Iranians with knowledge in their heads on how to make a nuclear weapon. But we can say very clearly, as every president has said, that we will not allow them to have a nuclear weapon. We didn't want them to have it before, and we certainly don't want to allow to have a regime that has done now these strikes against Israel and crossed that Rubicon and is willing to assassinate America. We don't want to allow that to happen. If I was advising President Trump, I would say once this all fails, this diplomatic approach fails, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will succeed. Maybe Iran will be willing to have direct discussions with Steve Witkoff. Maybe they'll do something that is not just the JCPOA, but the JCPOA, plus in the parlance that people are talking about. Maybe it will end up being JCPOA minus. We'll see. But I'm skeptical. So what happens after this fails? This is going to come up pretty quickly because in order to do the snapback, you have to make decisions this summer.
We should say the snapback sanctions.
The snapback
Just
sanctions in the UN, which will be done later in the year, but the work needs to be done in the summer. If that happens, then the Iranian regime has already said that they're going to leave the NPT, the non-proliferation treaty. Then we're in a nuclear crisis right then. So this is the environment that we're talking about. This is why I would be in favor of looking very hard at this, at not just approving an Israeli strike, but doing a U.S. strike. And the way that I would communicate this, if I was advising President Trump, would be for him to go up after that and say, listen, we have two red lines here, very, very quick, very clearly. You're not allowed to have a nuclear weapon, and you're not allowed to try to assassinate, me and others. And while there will be a lot of people around the world, and a lot of people inside Iran that will be on the regime side when it comes to the nuclear weapon, there'll be very, very much fewer people that will defend their attempts to assassinate President Trump. I would also say, if I was advising President Trump, I would say, listen, I also want to be very clear. I now have complete air superiority over your country, assuming that the campaign is successful. I could have taken out a whole bunch more of your military capabilities. I chose not to. I could have targeted your wider government capabilities. I chose not to. I could have targeted your economic. I could have targeted your energy. I chose not to. And I will not do any of that. If you retaliate across the Gulf, if you try to then expand this beyond the nuclear issue and the assassination, then I will respond in kind. But you are not allowed to have a nuclear weapon. You're not allowed to do these assassinations. I would also, if I was advising Donald Trump, take that moment to give a little bit of an olive branch, and I would say, it is not for the United States to decide who is running Iran. That's for the Iranian people to decide. And we are also willing to talk with you, once again, about ensuring that you have no nuclear program. If you want to have all the benefits of nuclear energy, there's lots of mechanisms that were discussed for many years that were rejected by Iran, by the Iranian regime. It's like, we can restart those negotiations. I'm willing to meet with the supreme leader at any time. That's what I would have the President Trump say. But I would say, these two things are no longer available. Because of your actions, because of how you have behaved in the last year and a half, this is no longer acceptable.
Will, this was utterly fascinating, and I strongly suspect that we are going to have to return to this very topic in the not too distant future.
My pleasure. Always happy to meet with you.